Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Here's a look at what's lined up for you on the show tonight. Our cover story tonight on Gravitas comes from Russia. Is the Wagner chief dead or alive? That question has dominated global headlines. A lot has happened in the last 24 hours following the news of a plane crash with the Wagner chief on the list of passengers. And since then, there is no clarity on whether the Wagner chief is dead or alive. Tonight on Gravitas, we are piecing together the latest developments. We are telling you what Russia is saying at this point. We also tell you how America has reacted and why the timing of this crash itself raises a lot of pertinent questions. We get you the latest reactions and also look at what the implications are for the Wagner Group from here onwards and for the Russia-Ukraine war if the Wagner chief is dead. Also on the show for you tonight, is the West not happy with the Chandrayaan-3 success? We tell you more about how some sections of the Western media covered the Chandrayaan-3 landing. What does the BRICS expansion mean for India? We join the dots and get you the bigger picture. What makes an airline experience ideal for you? Which are the world's best airlines? We tell you. Is it time to change workplace HR policies? We tell you how the case of an employee's bathroom break has raised a lot of crucial questions. All that shortly, but we are starting off the show tonight with some breaking news coming in right this minute. These developments coming in from Johannesburg, where the BRICS summit is underway. Reports say on the sidelines of the BRICS summit, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a conversation with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, this development has been confirmed by India's Foreign Secretary. The question is, what did the two leaders talk about? What was discussed? And reports say they apparently agreed to direct their officials to expedite the de-escalation process along the border. Prime Minister Modi further raised concerns over the unresolved issues at the LAC. Listen to this first.
On the sidelines of the BRICS summit, Prime Minister had interaction with other BRICS leaders. And in that conversation with President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister highlighted India's concerns at the unresolved issues along the LAC in the western sector of the India-China border areas. On the sidelines of the BRICS summit, Prime Minister had interaction with other BRICS leaders. And in that conversation with President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister highlighted India's concerns at the unresolved issues along the LAC in the western sector of the India-China border areas.
Now, remember, India and China remain locked in that tense border standoff. There have been attempts to ease those tensions, and just recently, India and China held the 19th round of military talks on resolving those issues. The two sides mutually agreed to not put new posts in close proximity to the LAC, and they also then agreed to identify specific limits of patrolling. And there has been no significant progress when it comes to Depsang and Demchok. Both sides have failed to make any significant progress. For more on the latest that's coming in, let's quickly go across to Siddhant Sibul, who has been monitoring those developments for us. Siddhant, what's the latest that you're gathering at this point? There has been a lot of speculation in the run-up to the BRICS summit over whether or not the two leaders will actually sit down for a bilateral meeting. But now we saw them interacting. It's an informal conversation, of course, that's happened. Tell us more about what that interaction was all about and what you're picking up at this point.
Well, Molly, there was no structured bilateral meeting between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. This was expected as well. But what happened and what we saw on camera just before that press conference on expansion was a brief interaction between the Indian and the Chinese leaders, and that handshake after the press conference got over, after the announcement was made on the list of countries. Now, these are important moments given that how relationship between the two countries has fallen since the Galwan incident, since 2020 incident where the Chinese actions, the aggressive actions, the line of actual control led to the death of 20 Indian soldiers. Now, since then, there hasn't been any conversation in terms of the structured meeting, but this is the second such conversation which has happened on the sidelines of a summit where India has conveyed its concerns. The last such meeting happened in Bali, in Indonesia, just a few months ago in November of 2020, where we saw those visuals of both leaders interacting. And now, this time, the MEA confirming that conversations happened, concerns were raised. And what is significant is that the officials of the two countries will be directed by the leaders that there should be a de-escalation. How and when it happens is something that we will see in next few weeks.
Right. Stay with me, Siddhant. Let's also go straight across to Captain Alok Bansal, who's with us on the broadcast as well. Thanks very much for being here. If you can just share with us your initial reaction to what's unfolded at this point, the latest coming in from Johannesburg regarding that interaction that the two leaders have had and the implications of this as far as the situation on the ground is concerned.
It's a very positive development, and I think if BRICS has to move forward, then these two leaders have to interact. They have in the past shared a wonderful personal chemistry. Unfortunately, events of last few years have derailed the relations completely. So I think it's a good beginning because on the border, as I said, along the line of actual control, there have been tensions. Most of the issues have been resolved, but two outstanding issues have remained. And last military commanders meeting could not resolve that. So I think we will finally need a political will to resolve these pending issues. And I think the resolution of these issues is in the interest of both the countries, more so in the interest of China than, of course, India. But it is definitely in the interest of both the countries. China would not want to have India as an antagonistic power. And these two countries not being on the same page will derail BRICS to a very great extent. And India, on the other hand, is importing a huge amount of items from China. China is our largest trading partner. We would not want tensions on the borders. So I think it's a very, very positive development if we can take it forward and revert back to the spirit that was seen during Wuhan and subsequent meetings between the two leaders. It will be, I think, a good beginning.
Right. Let's also talk about where the process of easing those tensions really stands at this moment, with those 19 rounds of military talks having taken place, and also the larger objective, of course, has been to build greater confidence with each other.
See, as I said, most of the conflict areas which were on the northern bank of Pangong Tso and other areas which have been resolved, I think as of now, whatever is the information available with me, I understand that there are only two issues that remain. One is Demchok, which is a recognized dispute between the two sides, and one is Depsang, where of course is the fresh dispute where Chinese have actually prevented Indians from patrolling up to the limit where they were patrolling earlier. So I think that's an issue which needs to be resolved. And I think once the political will is there, I think at military commanders level, it can be resolved easily. Unfortunately, in Chinese case, the military commanders don't have the latitude to resolve it bilaterally. So I think that's why it's been pending. I think it should get resolved if there is a political will between the two leaders.
Right, and Siddhant, let me also ask you this. The timing of this development is also very interesting and significant, coming ahead of the G20 summit, which is all set to take place in New Delhi next month.
Well, yes, it is significant given the fact that the joint statement is something that is much awaited. Will there be a joint statement after New Delhi G20 summit is the big focus so far? Let me tell you, there hasn't been any joint statement from various ministerial meetings which have happened in the past few months. The major issue has been the G7 versus Russia and China. On the other side, it is the mentioning of the Ukraine conflict in the joint statement, the two paras which hold the key to a joint statement. And will a personal chemistry between the two leaders pave way for a joint statement? We have to wait and watch. Next 2 weeks will be crucial. Before that, there will be the ASEAN meeting as well in Jakarta, where the Indian Prime Minister is traveling. There is no confirmation as to who represents China at the Jakarta meetings. Will Chinese President Xi Jinping travels to Jakarta is the big question. And if he travels, will there be again a conversation that can pave way for a diplomatic, essentially resolving the diplomatic crisis over the joint statement is the big focus.
All right, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much, Captain Alok Bansal and Siddhant Sibal, for joining us here on Gravitas and helping us better understand the implications of that interaction that the Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi have had just a short while back in Johannesburg. And staying on with the developments coming in from Johannesburg, where the BRICS summit has been underway. It's a big moment for BRICS, a group of 5 nations that has pledged to champion the global south. The bloc has been talking about admitting 6 new members. The expansion of the BRICS summit has been the crucial headline coming in as well. The group of rising world powers now more than doubling the ranks. The move will also help BRICS becoming a geopolitical rival to G7. Now, the announcement of the expansion came right after India backed that expansion bid. But is it all good news for India is the immediate question. Some new members that India has lobbied for and some India has been wary of at the same time. So what does the BRICS expansion really mean for New Delhi? Let's look into these aspects. First things first, on Thursday, the leaders of the current members, the states of BRICS, decided to, the member states of BRICS decided to add 6 new members to the bloc: Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Now, the newcomers will become full-fledged members from January next year. The club currently consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, remember. And since its formation, BRICS has expanded only once before. In 2010, South Africa was added to the bloc. And with a large number of countries clamoring to join BRICS, India was wary about the dynamics of an expanded bloc. And New Delhi indicated that it will prefer its strategic partners to join the club. And on Wednesday, India fully backed the expansion. India backed a consensus-based decision, so it does not become yet another platform for China to bolster its image as a leader. And reports say India took the lead in forging consensus within the bloc as well as selection of the new members. So where does India really stand vis-a-vis the 6 new members? Let's get to that now, one by one. Let's start off with the UAE. It's one of the 2 countries whose membership into BRICS was backed by India after the Abu Dhabi Crown Prince visited India as well as the chief guest for India's Republic Day celebrations in 2017. India and the UAE have boosted ties. The 2 sides are comprehensive strategic partners. The UAE is in fact one of India's most robust partners in the region. In 2021, India participated in a quadrilateral meeting alongside the UAE, and it has since evolved into the I2U2 grouping. India's political differences with the UAE, just like with Saudi Arabia, are over the role of China, but that has not been a hindrance when it comes to the relationship. Let's now talk about Egypt in particular. India also backed Egypt's membership. Relations with Cairo have rekindled recently. The choice was easy as well because India and Egypt signed a strategic partnership earlier this year itself. Ethiopia. Now, India has always looked at Ethiopia as one of the key African countries, especially as the seat of the African Union. New Delhi has also supported Ethiopia's position at the United Nations, especially on issues from the Tigray crisis to the controversy over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And in return, Ethiopia has also been consistent in the support for India in international platforms. Now, the country has been appreciative of the fact that India has never been hostile to their interests. With India advocating for greater African Union representation in the G20 as well as the United Nations, Ethiopia, you see, was the perfect choice. But the country has developed strong economic ties with China in recent decades. That's something important to remember here. And Saudi Arabia has been diversifying its diplomatic ties away from the West. Riyadh, in fact, has joined the SCO as a dialogue partner. Its move to apply for BRICS was in line with this trajectory. Joining BRICS will also give Riyadh access to emerging markets. Because Saudi Arabia's ties with China have also been developing recently, although we do not know yet if it will become a full-blown alliance, it does come at a time when India has made silent moves to make deep strategic inroads in the region. And talking about Iran in particular now, cultural and historical ties aside, Iran is an important country for India. The president has spoken with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi about the expansion over the phone as well ahead of the BRICS summit. Iran's addition to the bloc might upset the West. Even India's relationship with Iran has been through its own share of ups and downs, especially after the US-India nuclear deal and America's sanctions on Tehran. India had to cut its crude purchases from Iran due to these sanctions. Nevertheless, Iran remained a highly crucial partner for India. It has to do with its proximity to Central Asia. Remember, Iran also borders Afghanistan and Pakistan. And India and Iran have the potential to forge a common policy of engagement with Afghanistan. And Iran is also important as it provides an alternate route of connectivity to Afghanistan and Central Asian republics in the absence of permission for India to use the land route through Pakistan. And lastly, Argentina. India has had a strategic partnership with Argentina since 2019. And for Argentina, access to New Development Bank, also called BRICS Bank, is particularly attractive. You see, the country is struggling with depleted foreign reserves, high inflation, debt repayments to the IMF. India-Argentina relations are cordial and encompass political, economic, scientific, technological cooperation, including Antarctic research and cultural cooperation. So there you have it. As India backs the BRICS expansion, a shared vision of inclusive growth and equitable global governance is reinforced. Prime Minister Modi's proposals also promising the potential for collaboration, one that can harness India's technological prowess and foster a forward-looking BRICS organization. And coming to a question that's been dominating global headlines, is the Wagner chief no more? Did he die in a plane crash? As I speak, millions around the world are asking this very question, yet no one is close to an absolute answer. Everyone has their own version. Independent Russian sources say he's dead. Western officials say it's too early to say anything. Moscow is tight-lipped about the matter in several aspects. So who does one believe? And what really happened to the Wagner chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin? Is he really dead? And if yes, then how? Was his death an accident? The mystery is deepening with each passing moment. And over the next few minutes, we will try and demystify this. Let's start off with what happened. There was a plane crash. A private jet carrying the Wagner chief and 9 others on the passengers list crashed on Wednesday morning. The video on your screen showing the exact moment when it happened.
Пилотник. Сбили, бабахнуло в 2 раза, взорвалось, падает. Ты посмотри, падает.
So where did the plane crash exactly? Report says likely north of Moscow, somewhere in the Tver Oblast. It was en route St. Petersburg from Moscow, but could not complete the journey. Have a look at these images now. They are from a flight radar website. They show an unidentified plane flying in northwest Russia and then suddenly disappearing from the screen north of Moscow. Watch again. And have a look at this image now. This is apparently the plane that crashed. The Embraer Legacy 600. It's an executive jet which has recorded only 1 accident in its 20 years of service. That too due to mistakes by the crew rather than a technical failure. So what was it this time? Was it another crew mistake or a technical failure? No one really knows. And no one might. Have a look at these images. They show the aftermath of that crash, showing the plane engulfed in huge flames. There seems to have been no immediate efforts to actually douse the flames, at least not to the best of our knowledge. But a couple of hours later, local officials were seen carrying the dead in body bags and stretchers. Forensic tents had been set up at the site as well, as investigators went through the debris to collate the evidence. And around the same time, Russia's Civil Aviation Authority issued this statement. It published the names of the passengers and the crew members who were on board the aircraft. It did not mention how many of them had died. The Russian state television, Rossiya 24, also reported on the plane crash. It confirmed that the Wagner chief was on the list of passengers, but it did not say if he really died in that crash. Watch this.
Среди пассажиров частного самолета, который разбился в Тверской области, значится фамилия Евгения Пригожина. Об этом сообщили в Росавиации, которая начала расследование авиакатастрофы. Самолет, который направлялся из Москвы в Санкт-Петербург, упал в районе деревни Куженкино Балаговского района. В МЧС ранее сообщали, что на борту находились 3 пилотов и 7 пассажиров. Сейчас спасатели проводят поисковые работы на месте происшествия. Расследование катастрофы уже взял на личный контроль губернатор Тверской области Игорь Руденя.
And immediately after the news got out, all sorts of reactions started pouring in, naturally. The news divided opinions on the streets of the Russian capital. Some described it as a tragedy. Others were fairly unmoved. Listen into some voices.
First of all, it's a tragedy that the plane crashed. That means there were casualties.
Well, it was to be expected because of some of the things he did or didn't do. I don't know, but we think he did. They should be punished. Not necessarily by the main man in this country. Could be someone else. He had a lot of enemies, as far as I know.
And 826 kilometers away from Moscow, in Kiev, the reactions were equally mixed. Some were full of joy and did not care how the crash happened. Others believe the crash was pre-planned, aimed at strengthening Vladimir Putin's grip on power. And yet others said the Wagner chief himself staged his death so that he could flee.
This news causes only happiness. I want more such news. It would make things much easier for Ukraine.
I believe that Prigozhin staged his death in order to flee, so that no one knows where he's hiding.
It's not the first time they are killing their own employees and people, so there is nothing extraordinary here.
9,000 kilometers away from Kiev, the U.S. president was also asked about the crash in South Lake Tahoe. A reporter sought his response on whether he believed Vladimir Putin was behind it. His reply was that he was busy working out and he did not know for a fact what happened. But he also said that there's not much that happens in Russia that Putin is not behind. Listen to what was exactly said.
Mr. President, do you have a reaction to the plane crash in Russia?
I don't know for a fact what happened, but I'm not surprised.
Do you believe?
There's not much that happens in Russia that Putin's not behind, but I don't know enough to know the answer. I've been working out for the last hour and a half.
So you saw what happened, you saw how it happened, and you also saw the reactions. Let's now get down to some tough questions. Was this crash an accident or a conspiracy? Here's what a Forbes report said. Prigozhin's plane was targeted by Russia's intelligence agency, the FSB. It says this agency was likely behind the crash. And if this is true, then why? The report says it targeted the mercenary leader out of loyalty to their former boss, Vladimir Putin. So what's the basis of this claim? Some unnamed defense sources. Next question, if Prigozhin is indeed dead, what becomes of the Wagner Group? What happens from here onwards? This question also is mired in utmost uncertainty. You see, Prigozhin's top lieutenants were also on that plane, and this might leave a major void at the top of the organization. Who were these men? There's Dmitry Utkin, a former military intelligence officer who was a key figure in Wagner since its founding in 2014. And then there was Valery Cherkaskov. He ran Wagner's sprawling business operations in West Asia and Africa. Both of them were on board the plane. So if Prigozhin is dead, there is no one senior enough to lead the group. Observers say this could lead to the Wagner empire being taken over by other Russian groups or government agencies. Now that's theory number one. The second theory suggests that this crash was staged. That Prigozhin wants to appear dead so that he can escape any penalty that Putin might subject him to. I mean, we're talking about the most dangerous man in Russia after Putin. Someone who leads what is by far the world's most powerful mercenary group. Are we to believe that he did not see this coming? That he felt he could just fly in and out of Russia without the fear of being killed? The third theory is a little far-fetched. It suggests that this is yet another ploy by the Russian regime. I mean, why would Moscow go after the Wagner chief now when his group is more entrenched than ever in Africa, a place where Russia is said to be fighting a proxy war with the West? Whatever be the case, there is certainly more to it than what meets the eye. Until the Kremlin comes out with an official statement on the Wagner chief's status, it's too early to predict anything. Yesterday, Chandrayaan-3 landed on the south pole of the moon. India did something that no other country has been able to do. None of the superpowers have achieved this feat. In fact, Russia's lunar mission failed just a few days ago, and still it was humble enough to congratulate India on the victory. But is the West sharing that sentiment? You see, not everyone in the West is happy with Chandrayaan-3's success. And we get it. It's bound to sting when a former colony achieves what the colonizer could not. You see, the UK has never landed on the moon, and the frustration is bubbling over in rather ugly ways. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. This British anchor, his name is Patrick Christys. He congratulated India for Chandrayaan-3's landing, but not without snide remarks. Let me read out what he said. I would like to congratulate India on landing on the dark side of the moon. I would also like to invite India to return the 2.3 billion pounds of foreign aid between 2016 and 2021. He goes on to say, I'm quoting further, we should not be giving money to countries with a space program. As a rule, if you can afford to fire rockets to the dark side of the moon, you should not be coming to us with your hand out, quote unquote. Let me say that again. He says, you shouldn't be coming to us with your hand out. But is the UK in any position to be saying that? Because the last we checked, India had refused to take aid from Britain, and this happened more than a decade ago. It was the year 2011. India's former president served as the finance minister at that time, Pranab Mukherjee, and he clearly mentioned that India does not need British aid. The Indian government wanted to voluntarily give it up. But the UK begged them to keep taking the money, and still it did not have much to offer. Have a look at this report. The International Development Committee published that the impact of the British aid on India's development was next to nothing. So, just what is the UK so arrogant about? What is there to brag about? The British anchor did not just stop there, by the way. There is more to this. He said, and I'm quoting, India reportedly has 29 million people living in poverty. According to the UN, it is the highest anywhere in the world. It is also the 5th largest economy in the world with annual GDP of $3.75 trillion. Why are we paying poverty-stricken India when their own government will not bother? Yes, India is the 5th largest economy of the world. It overtook the UK only a few months back. Is this what people in the West are feisty about now? And speaking of India's poverty, the UK was not helping much to begin with. A spokesperson for the UK's Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office said, and I'm quoting, since 2015, the UK has given no financial aid to the government of India. Most of our funding now is focused on business investments, which help create new markets and jobs for the UK as well as India. What the UK has been sending is not even humanitarian aid. So why are we even bringing up those living in poverty? Let me just remind you, ISRO's space missions are one of the world's most cost-effective. Chandrayaan 3 had a budget of roughly $75 million. Hollywood movies like Interstellar and Gravity cost more than that. Just for perspective, Interstellar had a budget of $165 million, Gravity $100 million. And that speaks for itself. India had a huge achievement to celebrate, but instead of joining the celebration, here are some people trying to downplay India's success. It wasn't just the anchor. News broadcasters like BBC and CNN also did something similar. India is the 4th country to land on the moon, but it is the first one to reach the dark side of the moon. And while they were covering the landing when it happened initially, they were reluctant to acknowledge the extent of India's success. Other Britons also chimed in on the platform X. One said the UK should not be sending aid to countries with space programs so advanced they can land rockets on the other side of the moon. Where is this coming from? Is it jealousy or is it colonial hangover? Why are some Britons conveniently forgetting the $45 trillion their country looted from India? What about the plunder the colonizers took home? Should we also invite the UK to return that? While some in the West may not be too happy, some of India's neighbors surely are. On X, Chandrayaan 3's success was met with warm regards from people of Pakistan, so much so that congratulations neighbors started trending on the platform. It's just the government of Pakistan that fosters hate. So far, only the former minister Fawad Chaudhry has congratulated India. And China, for that matter, remains silent as well. Do they really need to be so petty? And our next story is from the United States. The country is slowly getting into election mode. Both Republicans as well as Democrats have become active once again. The Republicans slightly more, and here's why. On Wednesday evening, the Grand Old Party held its first primary debate, a debate to let the candidates shore up support ahead of the state's votes. At least 8 presidential candidates attended the debate. They traded barbs to jockey for the main position, with the frontrunner Donald Trump being absent. But there was one man who made up for his absence. Vivek Ramaswamy, an Indian-American millionaire entrepreneur who rose up the popularity charts ahead of the debate. And now we know why. Throughout the debate, Ramaswamy played up his image of an outsider and spoke at length about what he called anti-wokeism. Listen to this first, and then we'll tell you more about him.
I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax. The climate change agenda is a hoax. And we have to declare independence for it.
The climate change agenda is a hoax. We wonder where we've heard that before. I can only think of one name, and that's Donald Trump. Ramaswamy seems to be aping his political tricks. But who exactly is he, and how did he make it to the US presidential race? Let's find out. Vivek Ramaswamy is a 38-year-old Indian-American businessman whose family hails from Kerala. He is a biology graduate from Harvard College and studied law at the Yale Law School. At Harvard, he was the president of the Harvard Political Union, the oldest collegiate debating society in the US, and he made his fortune in biotech and asset management businesses. And his net worth, according to Forbes, is estimated to be an impressive $630 million. So how did a businessman like him enter the world of politics? Well, thanks to his influential communication skills and unconventional ideas. They helped him build a strong network that gave him the money to enter politics. And in February this year, he declared his candidacy for the Republican nomination for the US president's post. Wednesday was his big night. He shared the stage at the primary debate with renowned Republicans like Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, former US Vice President Mike Pence, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, and the former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley as well. Yet Ramaswamy managed to stand out, courtesy the kind of remarks that he made. He called Donald Trump the best president of the 21st century. He said America should stop funding the war in Ukraine. And lastly, he called his opponents super PAC puppets and labeled himself as a patriot who speaks the truth.
President Trump, I believe, was the best president of the 21st century. It's a fact. And Chris Christie, honest to God, your claim that Donald Trump is motivated by vengeance and grievance would be a lot more credible if your entire campaign were not based on vengeance and grievance. The choice we face in this primary is this. Do you want a super PAC puppet, or do you want a patriot who speaks the truth? It's disastrous that we are protecting against an invasion across somebody else's border when we should use those same military resources to prevent across the invasion of our own southern border here in the United States.
Now, these remarks helped him garner a lot of attention. Some praised them, some called them ridiculous, but there was a discourse nonetheless, and that is exactly what Ramaswamy needed. I mean, look at the kind of headlines that he's been making. The New York Times is talking about how Ramaswamy broke through. Washington Post is talking about how this man won the most online attention. And these were just 2 headlines. There are many more reports about his performance, many more stories on his prospects of winning. In a nutshell, Vivek Ramaswamy has managed to create the kind of buzz in a short span of time. The question is, will he make it to the next debate? We will find out soon enough. What makes an airline experience worth the bucks? What makes a flight memorable for you? Research shows that several factors like on-time arrivals, meals, the seat comfort, many more factors are looked at when judging an airline. And a new ranking of the world's best international airlines has now been released. What is new this year is the performance of Indian airlines. 2 Indian airlines have made it to the top 10. Our next report telling you more.
Minimal leg space, a cold and soggy meal, delay in the flight landing, or your bag going missing while you wait near the carousel. These are some annoying issues that make any flight unpleasant. But what if you knew which were the best airlines to travel in? A luggage storage company called Bounce has released its annual ranking of the world's best international airlines. 52 of the world's largest airlines have been analyzed. To curate the top 10 list, the company has evaluated airlines on the basis of 10 factors. On-time arrivals, percentage of cancellations, total number of flights, free carry-on allowance, free checked domestic allowance, free checked international allowance, meals, in-flight entertainment, seat comfort, and staff service. So let's count down the top 5 list of the best international airlines. In the 5th place is Vistara with a total score of 6.43 out of 10. Some passengers have complained about the food not being at par and the in-flight entertainment not working. But others have called the staff service excellent and the flights being meticulous of time. Korean Air has taken the 4th place with a 7.19 out of 10. Passengers have called the staff very friendly and that the aircraft was spotless. Others have also lauded the food quality. Qatar Airways has stolen the 3rd position with a score of 7.5 out of 10. Flyers have commended the meals and called it amazing. They have also called the staff service exceptional, but some have complained about the flights being delayed at times. Singapore Airlines lost the 1st position by a nick and stands 2nd with a score of 7.63 out of 10. Passengers have called the staff service very impressive. They have also lauded the in-flight entertainment and the meals, but some were unhappy about their baggage being mishandled. Now comes the number 1 airline. Japan Airlines is the victor with a score of 8.28 out of 10. Flyers have called the cabin crew awesome. The meals have also been appreciated and been called very good. A significant change in this year's top 10 list is the way Indian airlines have performed. It is not often that India grabs the title of one of the best, but this time not 1 but 2 Indian airlines have entered the top 10 for the first time in a long period. We have Air India at number 8 and Vistara ranking number 5. Japan and India are the only 2 countries who have 2 airlines in the top 10. Will India lead the list next year? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Let's now shift our focus to India, where a horrific incident has come to light. Recently, a teenager fell from the 2nd floor of his college hostel and died. His family said that he suffered ragging and sexual harassment in his hostel. The police have questioned students and the staff members and arrested at least 13 suspects. Reports say the 17-year-old was paraded naked and faced sexual assault as part of a ragging exercise. The first-year undergraduate's death has sparked protests across the university. Let's first tell you what really happened. On the 9th of August, the teenager was summoned by his seniors to their room. He was told to walk down the corridor on the 2nd floor of the hostel. And while he was walking, the 17-year-old was allegedly disrobed by his seniors. In order to escape, he tried to lock himself in a room but failed, and the teenager ran from one room to another while the senior students chased him. This incident ended with him falling from the second floor of the building. Can you believe that? Reports claim that the student was taunted with homosexual slurs. In fact, the police have said, and I'm quoting now, some residents of the hostel have said that the 17-year-old told them that he was not gay. What provoked him to say so is now the focus of our investigation. At least 13 people, like I said, have been arrested. 12 of them, which include current and former students, have been booked for murder and ragging. And one has been charged for allegedly obstructing the police from carrying out their duty. The police is expected to slap sexual assault charges on all the suspects under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. Now, let me remind you here, former students were involved in this case. Former students, people who should not even be allowed to stay in the hostel. Our current student says, and I'm quoting, they are powerful people. There are no restrictions on their entry into the hostel. That is how helpless the students feel. Several students are boycotting the classes, protesting against the authorities. Protesters say that they are going against the administration's inaction. Banners with anti-ragging messages have been thrown around across the university. Many signs have names of professors who are part of the anti-ragging squad. Looking at the rising anger among the students, the university has announced some anti-ragging measures. They include installation of CCTV cameras at the hostel gates, segregation of first-year students from their seniors, by earmarking a new boys' hostel, which will only be meant for freshers. Security will also be beefed up on the campus. According to the University Grants Commission, over the last 5 years, over 20 students have died by suicide due to ragging. Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu reported 4 deaths, followed by Odisha, which reported 3 deaths, Andhra Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Telangana, witnessing 2 student deaths each, Chhattisgarh, Himachal Pradesh, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, Punjab reported 1 death each. The UGC says that they received several distress calls on their anti-ragging helpline, and most calls come from engineering or medical colleges. In fact, officials say that students don't get to talk about what they are actually experiencing. The UGC says, and I'm quoting, universities must create avenues for students to talk freely about their feelings. Such students need support and understanding and should be encouraged to seek professional help at the university's center. Although the UGC is trying to curb the ragging crisis, officials say students, teachers and parents need to be educated about mental health, stress management and identifying signs of distress. Experts say that we need to destigmatize and encourage students to seek mental health support. And on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world. We do the difficult part.
This weapon has been banned, but the